So, we've gone over this a number of times, but both of us, at one point or another in our lives, have attempted to pursue some form of creative interest, be it in the film of or area of film, writing, something along those lines, even art to an extent.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things. Certainly, I don't know about for you, but for me, that was a big deal when I was younger, feeling like this was a trait that made me kind of an individual.
Yeah, I felt a little bit of that too.
Then the internet came along and you realize everybody and their mother has the same inkling.
Well, I mean, the same can be said about people that fuck cars now, thanks to the internet.
That's very true, very true. But I will say, like, I guess from the start, like, do you think that you get anxious about your ideas because of that? About how many of them are just scattershot throughout the web now?
I do. I mean, I think any creative individual has that kind of self-criticism within them where you get a little gun-shy about presenting like not fully fleshed out ideas, especially if they have any sort of similarity to something that's out there currently that may or may not be really popular currently.
Yeah. I definitely get plagued by that constantly. I think that derails me from doing most of my work in that. I think that's most of what writer's block is. You get so in your own head that you lose the thrill of actually putting something out there, and you forget that you can literally do whatever you want.
Well, yeah. I mean, the one thing that you have kind of started to stress to me recently is that the way creativity works is if it doesn't come from you, then it doesn't actually exist in the form that it would if you hadn't made it. So
right.
It may be 99% close to your idea, but if you didn't make it, then it won't have everything that you would have put into it.
I think it's that, and also kind of just accepting that no matter what, you're going to be biting off of somebody too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I think that really derailed me a lot when I first really got into film. And, I'm not original. I'm a kid from the 90s or whatever. Tarantino was like one of the first like eye-opening guys where you kind of were introduced to all these themes from all these different genres all at once. And it kind of opened your eyes to being like, whoa, you mean I can literally do whatever I want with a screenplay? But then you had all the hater guys out there saying like, oh, he just ripped off this movie and this movie. Just these esoteric, weird French things I've never heard of.
Yeah.
And that sense of feeling like, oh, I'm a hack because I want to rip something off, even though so many of my ideas when I was young were just that. So many of my ideas were just saying, like, I want to write a cartoon with Venom as the main character, and he's going to eat the Power Rangers. And, like, when you're, like, doing a writing assignment when you're a little kid, and then you write something like that, and your teacher thinks you're a genius because it's like, oh, these creative characters, just because they didn't really know that they were just fictional characters from a different universe. And,
yeah. Well, I think one way that some people get around that, I can't speak for these people, but I think one way to get around that is to actually embrace it. In recent years, we've seen a lot of homage, like a lot of like borderline parody type stuff, like that Kung Fury short is, it's basically just like aping the aesthetic of an era and fully embracing it and not entirely trying to be a unique product. It's nodding at you the whole time, and it thrives on it.
And I was going to say too, the other thing I'm realizing now too, that it's fascinating. We touched on this the last time we got together and talked about with acting, where when you see an actor start from the bottom and work their way up, because you have more access to that now, either by doing your own research or just by happenstance. Like, things happen where you notice a certain particular actor in certain things over and over and over until they're famous. But what I was going to say is, like, The Foot Fist Way was a movie that, was created years ago, and apparently Will Ferrell saw it and thought it was hilarious and gave the guy a budget, and then that's when he made Eastbound and Down.
Danny McBride.
Yeah, Danny McBride, and it's basically the same character. And that's something that I guess is dawning on me, like how many instances of that you see where somebody starts at the bottom with an idea and they just keep using said idea. It just gets bigger and bigger, and people start accepting, oh, that's what they were really going for with that. Like, now they have the budget to actually do what they really wanted to do with that character versus, okay, I'm going to work within my limitations and make, something that I can make for X amount of dollars. Versus like, what we grew up with, like Ernest scared stupid, Ernest goes to camp, Ernest goes to jail. It's one character, but you refuse to have him evolve. He just does the same thing over and over.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to throw this into a tangent, so I'll just leave this as just like a non sequitur. But like being a Japanese person, like I happen to like the idea of iteration. Like, I'm not as bothered by it as I think some other people are. Like, I don't mind seeing the same idea regurgitated over and over and over again because I appreciate like noticing the differences, and especially if a totally different creative voice jumps on board, sometimes it's neat to see the same story told in a different way.
To be honest with you, actually, like that's one of the things I've been excited about with the aesthetic of Final Fantasy 15.
Ooh.
That's supposed to be one of the big games of the holiday season right now. I probably won't play it, but I hear a lot of young guys at my work talking it up, and I like the fact that they stuck with a very traditional, like Japanese, like version of the characters, and rather than at this point they have the technology and the graphics to adapt them, make them look like real people.
Yeah.
But they wanted to go with the exaggerated hair, the giant swords, like all these things that have been established in Japanese, gaming history. Mm-hmm. And I like that. I'm happy that like you're going to have this big game be played by all these people the world over, and it's going to be with that type of look to it, because that's what Final Fantasy is. It's, Yeah,
I don't know who the lead art, like the lead creative director was for that game, because I know what was it? Tetsuya Nomura was the guy that used to work on it, like in I call it like the ugly years of Final Fantasy, where it was too aesthetically driven,
right?
Like the graphical breakthroughs were coming so fast, and it's just like, hey, let's just go nuts with the costume designs and just throw everything we got out there. And but I don't know who did it this time, but aesthetically, I'm impressed with it, and I do like that it doesn't stray too far beyond what we're used to, despite the whole new platform that they're working with the current generation consoles and stuff.
Yeah, I just think I agree with you completely. Like, it's nice still seeing Ken and Ryu looking like Ken and Ryu.
You can't say that about Ken anymore. Like, the joke I've made before is Ken looks like he should be serving me puffy tacos on a beach or something. He looks like Baja Bro now. Like, he's got a man bun and like CrossFit gear and.
But still, I mean, it's like he's supposed to be the American guy, and kind of a douchey one at that. Like,
well, Terry Bogard is way more America than Ken Masters.
Nobody looks like Terry Bogard.
Everybody should, though.
He looks like Marty McFly with flaming fists. Like,
no, America should be Terry Bogard. I should be able to grow a blonde ponytail and have a ball cap surgically like grafted to my scalp.
That says "Make America Great Again."
Well. Okay, it has a star. It has a star on it, and in very fine print, it says "Make America Great Again."
There you go.
Terry Bogard is a closet Republican. He's cleaning up the streets
with his fists.
With his fists.
Which is, an angle for a story idea that we've kicked around since we were children, of making a Final Fight movie at some point, because I think the beauty of Final Fight, and for those of you who don't know Final Fight at all, which is conceivable these days, unfortunately, it was an old Capcom game. It was a side-scroller, and you walked around, you beat up a whole gang of people. The choices for characters, you could either be a ninja, you could be a martial artist whose girlfriend was abducted, or you could be the mayor, who was a former pro wrestler whose daughter was the one who was captured, and you go around fighting these very... very interesting characters, like
very flamboyant gang members with 80s tough, so lots of open chests, like vests, and like overall I think one has like a wife beater and leather pants, and
very generic thugs from the 80s. And all you do is punch and pummel your way across the screen until you get to a boss, and then you fight the giant boss and you move on. I think it's an awesome idea, and I think part of the reason we both jumped on it was because there really is no plot to it, so you kind of have to fill in the blanks as you're playing it in order to keep from getting bored.
Well, I've said this before, that I mean, you really did just explain the plot. It's just Metro City has a gang problem, the Mad Gear Gang, and Mayor Mike Hagar has got beef with them. He pushes them a little too hard, so they kidnap his daughter. So he says, "Hey, fuck you! I'm gonna go punch everyone in your gang until I find my daughter." And that's the story. That's it. But I've said this before. Like, I feel like when I first played Final Flight, which had to have been when I was like 5 years old, maybe 4, because I mean it came out in the States, I think 91 on the Super Nintendo. My brain had the capacity to fill in those blanks, to project characterization onto these sprites that never say a single word of dialogue. I mean, there's only like 12 characters in the whole game, and all you do is punch them, and somehow I made like a dramatic story around them.
Right.
Because my active imagination just was able to fill in those blanks and like elevate things to like an actual story.
No, I did the exact same thing. I did the same thing with Golden Axe. I did the same thing with, Streets of Rage.
Yeah, I mean,
Double Dragon.
Sunset Riders, I made a big, huge story in my head as to like the nature of all the wanted villains and stuff. It's like, oh, like the guy with the whip and the shield, like he's definitely got something going on with him. It's like, why is the bad guy a British guy? Like, why is there a British guy in the Old West? Man, he's got a big story behind him.
Yeah, and most of the bosses like literally have 2 lines of dialogue, if that. Sometimes it's 2 words of dialogue.
Yeah,
but...
bury me with my money.
No, and that was the fun of the old games. But I think that's a fascinating concept, because those are types of things that, like, I would love to see a story idea with that only expanded. Taking some of what you conceived of when you were playing it, and actually, how do you fill in the blanks? Because that's so much of what it is that's difficult for people, I feel like, is you have to fill in the blanks. Everyone has the idea for a big scene. Everyone can picture, like, the magnificent car chase or the big battle on the top of a train car. And, everyone's envisioned that. That's I wouldn't say that's easy, but if you have an imagination, you should be able to piece something like that together. It's how do you keep it cohesive and have a plot that carries on forward,
Yeah, what you've always told me, and I remember when you were really intensely writing there for a while, what you told me a long time ago was that the filler in writing, especially like a novel or something, is what is the real work. Everybody can have bullet points that they're trying to hit, but unless you have that connective tissue that forms a complete cohesive thought, it's not a story. Like, it's just stuff.
I've actually noticed that too, and forgive me if I'm wrong in this, because I've only read a handful of them, but I've seen that now even with like intellectual pieces.
Good job.
I know. Where it's like Malcolm Gladwell, for instance, where he'll tell a story of something and then throw in some facts and whatnot, and it keeps it interesting so much so that you're reading along with it. But then I feel like a lot of the time at the end, nothing's really said. It's just a lot of facts thrown at you with an interesting enough of a story thrown in along the way that you don't get bored like in a history textbook. And then at the end, you feel smarter for it because you picked up a few things along the way. But at the same time, it didn't really accomplish the thesis of the piece.
See, I haven't actually read Malcolm Gladwell. Everybody and their mother has told me about his writing. But again, not to throw things into a tangent, let's keep this focused. But and also not to connect everything to Netflix, but which I don't have, by the way. I feel like long form narrative, especially in media, like in film and TV, is becoming the norm to the degree that things like filler aren't recognized as filler as much anymore. It's part of the deal,
right?
Where it's like one of the Netflix series that I have watched is Daredevil.
Okay.
And it's a good show, but it's very obvious that it's too long. There's a few episodes too many, and there's plenty of scenes that need to be trimmed. But I think that's kind of the expectation now, is that we're at an age right now, we're at a point right now where media distribution is so easy now that if you put out content, you are guaranteed to have people watch it. So if you make 13 episodes of Daredevil, people aren't just going to drop it halfway through. They're not going to get bored. They're just going to be like, well, it's only a few more episodes. We'll just finish it. So
and at that point, you're committed. So you've and everyone's kind of a completionist at some point.
Yeah, and the structure of television in particular, the pacing of an episode is radically different from a film, where in an episode, all you need to do to keep the audience engaged is have those bullet points.
Right.
And what you do with the filler is fill time. Like, in order to make good television, you kind of have to have those crescendo moments. Otherwise, the impact of those dramatic beats will just be completely ruined.
See, what I'm taking from that, and I agree with you, is I feel like you're saying, like, as long as you throw in, like, one major event, you can literally have a whole episode of just nothing.
Well, Daredevil, hallway scene.
Yeah.
Like, there's people that can't remember much of that show, but everybody remembers that moment.
Yeah, and for a series, I guess, that I've been following, like The Walking Dead, too. Like, I feel like there's a lot of episodes where nothing happens, and then you just kill off a character at the end.
Yeah, and then that episode has meaning.
Right, despite the fact that you were just filling up.
59 minutes was nothing.
Well, and I think that goes back to Tarantino, like I said, that I think that's his greatest strength, is that he does such a good job of even using the filler moments to have something to it enough to where it becomes a memorable scene to everybody. Like, it's interesting now when I hear people discuss his older films, like Pulp Fiction being like the big one, right?
Yeah.
And like how many people actually like now will like talk about the diner scene, which is such a throwaway nothing. It was just an excuse to make John Travolta dance, like literally. Like, that was 100% it. It was like, I have John Travolta, I need to have him dance. How can I do this? So I know, I'll have him go to a 1950s diner, you know. But now people remember it's like, oh, Steve Buscemi was the waiter, and, you know, he was dressed as Buddy Holly, and, you know, all these things. But that's what I mean. It's a nothing scene. But he managed to do it in a way where it holds your attention all the way through. Inglourious Bastards, too. There's a lot of dialogue in there that's just really nothing much being said, you know, because so much of that movie is the roller coaster of tension.
Yeah,
you know,
it's almost like a De Palma film or a Hitchcock film.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of Hitchcock in that regard. But yeah, it's very much one of those things where even in the scenes where it's just characters kind of filling in the plot and talking, or where he throws in enough like little details to where it becomes more engaging than just like for instance, when you have Mike Myers as Winston Churchill. Like, it's such a weird, goofy scene that's just literally just convey part of the plot to why they have, what's his face, King of the Aryan Race, Fassbender or whatever. Why he all of a sudden is introduced into this plot, you know?
Yeah.
But it's like, very much it's done, you know, they have the globe that he opens up and it has the liquor bottles and like all these little things that keep you from getting bored because you're looking at it and you get distracted by the fact that this is poor acting and awkward as hell, But that's a really cool thing, and if I ever have a big study, I want one of those, you know?
Fuck yes.
So I guess that's always been the struggle, though, is like, you know, separating just the big scene moments and how do you fill it out. I guess I was going to share with you, actually, something I had tried to been writing. It was actually based on the old video game Pit Fighter. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The performance capture stuff, for the kids at home that may not remember this, taking actors into the studio and taking animations or photographs of them in place of sprites, like in place of actual gameplay graphics, was kind of a thing in the early 90s.
Yeah, Mortal Kombat, NBA Jam. Midway was the big one for that. But
yeah, I think Pit Fighter may have been a Acclaim/Midway product.
That would make sense. But yeah, it was that, but like there's no plot to that game. You pick one of three disciplines for your fighter. It's either a pro wrestler, a kung fu guy, or like a quick guy. Like I guess I don't even know if he has a classification. Mm-hmm. And you just stand in a room with a bunch of bloodthirsty morons who stab you if you get too close to them.
Yeah.
And you try to pummel the bikers or whoever you're fighting, you know.
And then at the end, you get to stand on a forklift with a bunch of money.
And there you go. And it actually was a terrible game.
God! Like the home version in particular. I remember
god awful.
I remember seeing that advertised and be like, "Oh man, Pit Fighter!" And then it's missing all sorts of animation. It controls like ass. It's just a terrible game.
Okay, so let me set this up for you then. So I wanted to do a thing where it's kind of based on that, where it's just underground fighting.
Okay.
Because underground fight tournaments are something we grew up with in many
many
movies. And how do we find a way to balance it with the modern era where everything has to be within a reasonable, like, realistic capacity? Like,
fine.
I mean, look, everything's being done with experts overhead, so you can't just have, fantasy world of the Kumite. Like,
it's like, that's not how you lock in a triangle.
Yeah, well,
like, he didn't get his leg all the way over.
Well, and now, too, the people are more, in particular Americans, are more aware of the world. You can't just say, like, oh, this other country you're not aware of and have never traveled to. Yeah, they have illegal fight tournaments all the time. Don't worry about it. Like, it's Thailand. You'll be cool. Like, I feel like enough people have gotten out and they're, like, realizing, oh, the rest of the world's pretty much as developed as we are. Oh, like... But, 80s rants aside.
Okay.
So basically, to set it up, the protagonist.
Okay.
I envisioned him just generic white guy, kind of skinny. I actually pictured him as who was the kid from Fast and Furious 3.
Oh.
I don't remember his name.
Man, I don't know his name either. That's sad.
But I actually always thought he was a great actor. Like
that's what you tell me. I haven't confirmed this.
Okay. Well, anyway, like I think I like him because he's kind of nondescript.
Okay.
Because I want this main character to be, like, just have no personality. Because essentially, he's just being forced into these tournaments to fight, so that his brother can profit off of him. His brother, I pictured to be a real scary fuck. Like, actually, like, think True Romance. What's his name?
Gary Oldman?
Yeah, Gary Oldman, True Romance. Like, just gnarly, like... One of those guys, if you see him on the other side of the street, like, you're actually kind of on edge. Like, just... And basically, again, it's this guy's his fixer. He sets him up with these fights all across town in various locales.
Okay.
That part's easy.
Yeah.
You set up a fight wherever, It's how do you fill in the blanks? So, first sequence I had, the very beginning of it, is just this kid trying to go through the supermarket. He's all... beat up and kind of wandering around, kind of in awe of the supermarket itself, like, just because he doesn't really have money. He's very poor. He's very, grew up shit, and he's trying to fit in with this normal thing in society, and it's just he's so out of place. And he gets up to the cashier, and the cashier is a pretty girl or whatever, and he's so awkward he doesn't know what to do around her, And yeah, it just kind of conveying this guy, like, I don't want to say that, like, he has mental health problems, because I don't think it's that case at all. It's just he's just so separated from a normal life.
Yeah.
But he's trying his best to try to blend in, and
I'm picturing ways that you could sell this already, where, like, even the lighting in the supermarket is, like, radically different from, like, the fight venues.
Exactly, and just kind of the whole, like, just picturing a sheepish guy, like, dressed really just purely for functionality, so he looks homeless, even though, like, it's more he's just concerned about staying warm, and he can't make eye contact because it's not because he's he's just terrified of people. Like, he doesn't want to offend anybody. He's just a really good-hearted person, and it's just him kind of, like, going around and being kind of teased, kind of just clearly, like, not fitting in. And then all of a sudden he ends up in a fighting arrangement. He ends up, the first one I had him in was like an auto shop, where it's just a bunch of guys after work, they're drinking beers, they got their one alpha dog, very video game like, where it's just no explanation given, just these guys work on cars, they're hard asses, And so he has a fight, and he, this kid who looks like nothing shows up, and he does his thing. He basically gets pummeled until he reaches a point where he snaps, and then he fights back, and he beats the shit out of the guy. Very Jet Li in Unleashed. Well, I guess the difference with this one is the way I had him set up was this guy had just gotten so pummeled by his brother constantly that was his thing. Like, he just could not fight back. That's the only person he can't flip that switch with.
Oh, okay.
And that's why he's kind of been controlled by him his whole entire life. They obviously grew up shitty. I don't know if I even wrote it in, but it's kind of implied that, the brother kind of raised him, and this has been a means for them to make profit.
It's it's that weird kind of relationship where it's like, this person has done very little good for you, but they're all so you're still latched onto them in, like, in a genuine loving way.
Yeah.
But for no good reason, really.
I also kind of like the idea too of having him just kind of be this more meek figure.
Yeah.
Where it's more, most of the fight scenes I picture more of just seeing him being brutalized up until the last moment of desperation. And then he usually unleashes with some form of ultra violence, like he bites, he claws, like he does whatever's necessary. And that's kind of what separates him too, is like he just goes into this animal mode essentially, and just, you know, is willing to do things just because out for pure survival sake.
Yeah.
You know, like I feel like it keeps him kind of human in that regard, despite the fact that he's a pit fighter.
Well, it also allows the audience to make that separation where it's like you don't blame him for the horrible things he does because you've seen how it comes about and what it took to get him to that point. So it's like it's a defense mechanism. It's not there's no malevolent intent on his end. It's just kind of like, oh, he's in this situation, this is the only way out.
Right. And then I had kind of had the filler sequence, so I kind of skipped over it, but originally it was he goes to the supermarket, you know, he's buying all this awkward stuff because he doesn't really know how to cook. He's buying what he can afford. So he ends up with, like, you know, a few bread, you know, cheese, and then like a potato. Now he goes to the back of the bus, you know, some kids are just being obnoxious. They kind of bat at his shit. It gets strewn everywhere, and the only thing he has left is the potato. So after he does this big brutal fight where he gets paid out like $20, he gets on the bus, he goes home, and all he has is a potato to eat after all is. Throws in the microwave, heats it up, doesn't, you know, just eats it basically raw and goes to bed.
I'm picturing him burning his tongue or his palate.
That's what I mean. Just like one of those things, like he's already gotten the shit kicked out of him, and then like, yeah, and it's like kind of one of those things where it's like the only moment of like joy he gets is when he has like a ketchup packet or something to like add to it and makes him feel like, you know, yeah, I cooked something, you know. But then, and then further on, like another filler sequence I had is just him like on a day off, basically. And so to try to fit in, he goes to a bar. He sits at the bar, and he's just kind of having a beer, and he doesn't even know why he's there. He doesn't like to drink. He's just kind of, this is what normal people do, right? Then some bar hussy comes along and basically convinces him to do a bunch of shots. So he gets wasted and pukes all over the bar. She steals his money when he's incapacitated. So he has to go home and eat not mayonnaise sandwiches. He has to eat toothpaste sandwiches like Stone Cold Steve Austin. But it's just shit like that, where it's just like I feel like those scenes almost more would stand out than the fighting, which I feel like the goal would be for something like this. I feel like the fighting part's easy, like, you know, it's choreography and ultra violence, and, you know, but
it's a minor element in the story. It's a character study for sure.
Yeah.
And then every once in a while there's violence. And probably not filmed in a way that's entertaining. It's more just like, whoa, this is a shocking thing that is happening.
I picture a lot of like editing to where it's just kind of you cut into it.
Oh, okay.
Like a lot of like, you know, you see him like squared up to fight, and then all of a sudden it just cuts to his face being driven into the pavement. Or just like when he gets drunk with this lady in the bar, where it just goes from him just sitting there staring at like the TV to like all of a sudden there's like 5 shot glasses on the bar and he's hammered.
I'm picturing like an editing style kind of similar to The Wrestler.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so much of the inspiration is something like The Wrestler.
Or you're following this character that's in a shit situation, and like the editing of that movie and the pitch you're making right now makes me think of like a style with it's kind of following the flow of like the peaks and valleys of his thought process.
Right.
Where this is a very plain guy, so those moments of quiet seem very long and very peaceful, and then when it gets violent, it's just like staccato, just like dot 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 dot. Right. And also just like too to try to emphasize that like this could just be just a regular guy you see on the bus who you look at him and you think he's a weirdo, but you don't realize he's in this awful situation. But yeah, that was something. I mean, it goes on from there, but so it's just like little vignettes, like showing this guy's life in between all this nastiness. Did you have like an end arc or like a culmination?
I figured what would end up happening is obviously it would get revealed later on that the brother has this power over him. Yeah. And the brother's a fucked up guy, and he gets into some fucked up situation with some higher up guys. Like basically he goes from having these fights with mechanics and like nightclub owners to actual like some big money fuckers in the city who actually, you know, stand to lose things, it's a bad situation. And basically, I've had it ending with him essentially sacrificing himself for the sake of the brother so he can be freed from everything. I don't know how that would be it him like charging in and trying to kill everybody, or if it's more like the Slumdog Millionaire where he just kind of concedes and lets them come for him because he doesn't show up for the fight. You know, I was probably leaning more towards that, of just kind of accepting, like, you know, they're going to come for me because I set up this fight, and I realize now how horrible I've been, and, you know, to atone for that, I'll, you know.
Yeah, I would think that would be the best way to handle the brother. Where it's like, you need to have him have some sort of arc, because the main guy he seems kind of static. Like, it seems like that's his place, is that he's trapped. Like there kind of is no redemption for him because he doesn't have it in him to break free of that. It's kind of left to the brother to guide him towards something.
I also, like, I believe, I'm going to have to scan through this again, but if I remember right, I think I had him set up where he runs into, like, a blind lady on the bus, like an elderly woman, and it just kind of becomes one of those things where he follows her home because she, like, just talks to him. And it's just kind of one of those things where he just sits with her on the porch and she tells him all these crazy ass stories from whatever, and he's just happy to have somebody he's engaged with. It has nothing more to do with anything. It's just and I think that's how I wanted it to end, was just kind of like, while his brother's brutally killed or whatever and left for dead in a dumpster, like, he just gets to sit on this porch and be free of it all, and, you know, and that's all he's ever wanted, you know.
I like that, actually. Not to, like, we started out this conversation talking about influences and about creativity and about that feeling of, like, oh, I don't want to rip other people off, but while you were talking, I was thinking of this. I mean, this is how my brain works, makes associations, but there was a couple of movies that I actually think that the one was a ripoff of the other, but nobody said anything about it. Like, everybody kind of said, they're not related at all. Shut up. Channing Tatum is kind of a big deal right now. Shut up. So the movies I'm talking about are, there's a Chinese film called Fatal Contact. There's a Wu Jing starring in it, like a year or two removed from SPL. So he's this Chinese martial artist that is now, like, in his 40s and is a super big fucking deal in mainland China. Yeah. Like, any role that requires a martial artist, they try to shoehorn him in. And he made a movie called Wolf Warrior that's fucking garbage, but it made a shit ton of money in China. Scott Adkins has a very small role in it. Anyway, Fatal Contact is about a Chinese martial artist that's, like, on I think, like, an Olympic team or, like, a national wushu team. So he's like a lifelong martial artist, and he's from the boonies, and he ends up in Hong Kong and somehow runs into a street urchin that somehow they all collide with each other, and he ends up in underground fighting. Okay. And he makes a friend with the street urchin guy, and the street urchin guy and him come up with an arrangement where it's like, hey, this is really profitable and you're a super good fighter. So they keep doing it. And then at one point in the story, a love interest gets introduced, and she's also from the streets, and she starts manipulating the main guy, where she loves him, she sleeps with him and all sorts of stuff, but you find out later that she's using him for his money. Right. And so everybody's exploiting this poor country boy, and then it ends in a huge bloodbath. Right. Where the martial artist guy finds out everything that was a lie, and he goes nuts and he kills some people. Anyway, the other movie is a Channing Tatum movie that came out, like, the same year, called Fighting. Yeah, I remember that. That has basically the same plot, where there's even the story with the girl manipulating him and stuff, and he's just, you know... Yeah, now you get the men's rights activists all up in arms. Good job. Oh, I didn't mean it. I'm sorry. No, but I see what you're saying, and that you know, I haven't seen either of those. Well, there's like we started this conversation off. It's just beats. It's just moments. It's not the content itself. Right. It's just similarities. Your story is entirely unique. It just bears similarities to other things. And inevitably, I mean, of course, having, like, a blind woman to savior or whatever has been used countless times. Unleashed has Morgan Freeman, right? A blind pianist. But then I guess it's wrestling with that concept of actually, oh, that's a source of inspiration. That's why it's in there, kind of, you know. Other parts, honestly, are things from my own life, like the
the scene in the supermarket, like I didn't go into too much detail on it, but like I really wanted to emphasize just how like in awe this guy is of this. Like just everything is him pulling shit off the shelf, looking at, putting it back. Like this is his like free time. Because I remember when I worked in the Blockbuster on Aurora, which is a shitty part of Seattle, this prostitute used to come in, and she was all just like beaten by the world, you know, and drugged out, and it was sad. It was really sad because she would come in and she'd pull 40 movies off the shelf, and then she'd wander around, she'd put them all back. It was like you were literally picturing this person trying to envision this life of not having to do what she has to do, and trying to just imagine the shitty life I had at the time, which is, you know, being a shithead at a, you know, working at a video store. But like that was better. That was an escape, and that was kind of what I wanted to see in that scene. You know, same thing. The drinking scene, something I've seen in a bar of just somebody getting wasted and taken advantage of, and just for financial means, you know, like that. Like,
well, see, what's cool about movies today is that, when your movie initially comes out, sure, you're gonna have all sorts of haters saying, "Oh, it's just like fighting with Channing Tatum."
Right.
But you know, now movies have something called director's commentary.
Yeah.
Which, if you listen to any movie by any director, they will list off influences shot by shot.
Yeah.
Like Scorsese will list off influences. Like he'll say, "This shot is in this movie specifically because I saw it in this movie and I thought it was cool."
Yeah, which is crazy, but
so, you know, even the masters, you know, can admit that they draw direct inspiration from things that already exist, and there's no problem with it because, hey, guess what? You know, your movie is your movie.
Well, I think that's kind of like the era this day, and you know, we have the whole hipster thing, and all that is like individuality. It's like push that forward, like be an individual, you know, and all you've done is create a movement where everybody's.
Well, it's just everybody trying to one up each other.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Everybody looks like an idiot because.
And I guess that's cool, you know, that's fine, but that has become something more valued. I think is like expressing like something that really interests you.
Yeah.
Versus, you know, trying to fit in, trying to, you know, it is what it is. But yeah, I think I definitely had too much of that when I was first trying to approach that stuff of just worrying too much about like ripping off other ideas, worrying too much about, you know, how am I going about this? Am I just biting off of things? And do I have any actual individual thought here? Like,
well, I mean, I think just committing to putting pen to paper and making that agreement with yourself that this makes sense to the narrative and it's something that I want to see.
Yeah.
So what more justification do I need to put it in there? Like, really, if it isn't outside of the rhythm or the boundaries of the narrative, then I don't see what the problem is.
Yeah, I guess yeah, it's one of those things that's very difficult to wrestle with from time to time.
Well, yeah, I mean, I run into that roadblock all the time. Oddly enough, a lot of the problems I have lately with storytelling and stuff is logistics. Like, I've found myself like wanting more and more to actually pick up the camera and run out and do stuff, but finding like actually figuring out how to do the things that I want to do is more the problem than figuring out what I want to do.
Right.
But that's maybe a story for another day.
Yeah, we'll certainly have to go into that more. I mean, really, like, I feel like these conversations are good because it gives you a chance to, you know, bounce ideas off one another in terms of just creative feelings. Cause,
well, not to stop you right there, but going back to your pitch, so if Pit Fighter is, I'm assuming, the title,
mm-hmm.
and the initial spark that kicked things off, like, do you feel tempted to draw draw more inspiration from the game, put more elements in there?
No, not at all.
Just purely just like
just the concept,
title
or
and concept.
Yeah. Because the thing is, at a certain point, it becomes too much of a video game, and video games, I think, now have become enough of a medium for storytelling that it's not necessary. Like, I don't really see a point in having to make a Mortal Kombat movie now with all the animation they have and, you know, the story arcs they've put into just even the pre-fight things now.
Yeah. I mean, Mortal Kombat's a good example of a fighting game with a narrative, but
no, but that was huge when we were younger. Like when they made the movie version, it's like,
well,
you know.
What's funny about fighting games in particular is that so much of the, I'm doing air quotes, canon, like of the story, like the connective tissue between all these characters, like all the characters in all the fighting games usually have feuds between them and usually have connecting arcs. And I think it's funny how just like through osmosis or whatever, like people are aware of these things where it's like everybody knows that Ryu and Ken have beef because Ryu put the scar on his chest, and everybody knows Ken and Ryu. Ryu and Saga. Ryu and Ken, you know, they train together and all that, and everybody knows Akuma / Golki has beef with all the Shotokan guys, and like, it's just funny how it's very rarely explicitly stated in the games, especially the Capcom ones, and yet somehow people are aware of these things.
But I think they do it in a way where you can put the pieces together pretty easily. Like, I think just the appearance of like Evil Ryu, for instance, like you see that and you're like, okay, clearly he has all the same powers as, you know, Akuma or Goku, whatever you want to call him. Like, so it's okay. Clearly, somehow he either brainwashed him or he convinced him to do it. You saw it with Tekken. Did the same thing with Kazuya, and you know,
Heihachi,
Jin and
Jun, and
yeah, exactly. It goes
on and on. And
but
on.
It's just like very much like all you have to do is put a subtle thing in there. Like,
see, I love that shit. Like that's actually like why like Final Fight and Double Dragon and those very simple stories, like that's why they speak to me as like a platform to work from in terms of like storytelling through a different medium like film or something. Because you have those tiny little inklings of relationships between the characters that are just waiting to be expanded on. And like Pit Fighter is a funny one because like as far as I know, they don't have anything in there. Like you wouldn't be tempted to like put a character design or something in there just like as a wink and a nod to the audience.
Possibly, but honestly, I just think that concept as a whole is such a like foreign, ancient thing.
We should get J.J. Watt to be in there or something as the guy with the didn't he have like bright blue wrestler pants or something? Just have him show up in the background.
I mean, it's possible. I mean, that's kind of one of those things I guess you leave for the imagination. I mean, or like I tend to focus on writing. That's, you know, the one thing I know how. I don't know how to do cinema. I imagine that's one of those things you leave open for a director. Well, if they wanted to put an homage in there, you put a character in the background who's clearly from the game. You make a costume, you know, anything. Like, obviously, the forklift with money is the first thing that comes to mind for me.
Yeah.
But no, I wouldn't focus too much on that because I think that too many of those things sometimes can derail the actual story.
Because then you start trying to find ways to shoehorn them in, and it starts affecting the storytelling.
Well, that's what killed the Street Fighter movie.
Oh God,
Street Fighter movie. I mean, that's a train wreck of a film, but they tried to make it so much of a like, how can we include every character into this in some capacity rather than just make it the damn tournament and you know.
Yeah, let's put T-Hawk in there as some special forces guy that's like 5'6" or something.
Yeah, it was just they just went too far in trying to how can we do the best way to include everybody. Oh, I know, we'll just make these people reporters and we'll make these people military and we'll make these people, you know.
What was with that? Like in that era, what was with like Super Mario Brothers movie and the Street Fighter movie? Like they made it like super high concept, and it's like, keep it simple. Just Mortal Kombat, for example. Well, Mortal Kombat is Enter the Dragon. Just with supernatural shit. And it was fine.
Up until very recently, though, I mean, video games were not considered a means to profit from when you were looking at it from the perspective of a Hollywood producer.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a reason for that. It's because of Super Mario and all that shit.
Well, it was that, but it was also just kind of like there's so many other factors that go into those things. But certainly, yeah, you should just go to the very basic aspect of it rather than
either keep it very simple like they did with Mortal Kombat, which I mean it's a very complicated story but presented in a very simple way, or you be very faithful to the source material.
Yeah.
And especially nowadays, I think that's the trend. Like that Assassin's Creed movie looks like they're really going for it. Like,
actually looks decent too.
Fassbender put his own money into it, so he has confidence in it. That man usually picks very good movies. I have no interest in that series, but if he's back in it, then I think it might be good because he's a very good actor.
Yeah.
And like I said, he picks pretty good projects.
Well, and like you were talking about off air earlier about how conspiracy bros and so much of the plots of those games are like world conspiracies and just like,
what is it with fighting the man and parkour? Like, why is it whenever you fight some sort of establishment, you somehow gain the ability to jump off rooftops and do flips and shit?
Like in Sleeping Dogs not Sleeping Dogs.
Watch Dogs.
Watch Dogs, yeah.
And what was it, Brink? And like, why is parkour associated with fighting the man? Like, I don't understand that. I'm guessing it's freedom. Oh, Mirror's Edge, another example.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. I think it's a matter of freedom and saying I defy even the laws of gravity. And
it's like, I can flip off of anything. It's like, oh, you put up handrails? Well, guess what? I'm gonna flip off of them. It's like, you can't stop my French acrobatics.
I did think Watch Dogs 1 in particular was really comical with that when you have a main character who's supposed to be like 50. And like kind of out of shape, and yet you can parkour off of anything.
Well, yeah, it's like, yeah, we had parkour in like the 1200s. Yeah, those guys were in super good shape because they ate every day. They knew how to stretch. Sure.
Yeah, I might have to look into that. That's a funny concept.
Unless see some guy in full body armor try to parkour off of something. Just fucking break his hip. It's like, Altair is down.
All right. Well, I think we're going to call it at that. Cause,
I think we're running out of steam. But that was a good chat, though.
Yeah, and I think we're setting ourselves up. I'm curious to get some of your pitches next time. So
well, I think I'm actually going to sit down and try to put some serious thought into my Final Fight movie/series pitch, because I have those highlight moments. I do have those because I always have those, but I think I can find the connective tissue because I think there's enough there that I can actually make a legit character out of Cody and Hagar. Probably not Guy, but Guy will be there. So I have stuff to think about.
All right.
And hopefully stuff to talk about later.
I wish you the best with that because I'd be very curious to hear. And honestly, I kind of want to pick up this idea I had in the past and work on it a bit more because it's actually not as awful as I remember it. So.
Well, it sounded good tonight. So, yeah, keep working on it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. Appreciate it.